Hey everybody. So I got a bit of a strange one for you today. So when I was 7 years old, something really weird happened to me that I could never explain. It was actually so weird that about a week later, I stopped thinking about it and it left my memory for a really long time. So there I am, late one night, and I'm in my room and I'm trying to go to bed. Now at the time, I'm 7 years old, my brother's about 5 or 6. We had this bunk bed that we shared in this little room, and I was always on the top bunk. Well, this one night, I start hearing this noise like someone is playing with my piggy bank, like there's someone at my desk messing with my stuff. So as slowly as I could, I look up over the bed and I see these two figures are at my desk and they've got my piggy bank in their hand. This is that piggy bank. It's this little brass piggy bank, and the thing about it is because it's all metal and we had some coins in there, if someone's messing with it, you're going to hear it. And that was the weird part. I distinctly knew that it was my piggy bank because I knew what this thing sounded like. Now, the two people that I had seen, I had convinced myself was my mother and father, and that they were, for whatever reason, in my 7-year-old head, I was like, okay, so my mom and dad might be struggling with money right now, and so they are trying to get into my piggy bank to take some money. Which is weird because firstly, my parents would never do that. They would never have taken anything from us without letting us know. That's just not who they were. Secondly, we didn't have a lot of money. My brother and I maybe have had 2 silver dollars in there each at the time, so that wasn't going to solve any money problem. The third weird thing was one of these people was really tall. At the very least, they were taller than the other one. I mean, I was like maybe 7 or 8 feet up in the air on the top bunk looking down at them. So I don't actually know how tall they were. But there was a tall, skinny one, and in the dark, I thought maybe they had longer hair. So I assumed it was a woman. The other one was a stubby, fat man. And that was also kind of strange because I had somehow convinced myself that it was my parents and I was seeing things, but my mother and father were both very tall and fit. Actually, my father was 6'2", so there was just no way that this was my parents. Now, another really strange thing is I don't remember being scared. I remembered that I just thought this was weird, but it was a matter of fact that it was just happening. I wasn't sitting there like terrified, which is weird because if there's some stranger in your room, especially as a kid, you're going to sit there and be like monsters or something. And that didn't cross my mind. I looked over, thought it was strange, and then as slowly as I could, positioned myself back in bed and put my covers on me and just kind of sat there until I stopped hearing the noise. As soon as the noise stopped, I peered back over my bed and I noticed that no one was in the room anymore. It was completely silent. Even my brother wasn't moving, and I thought that he had been asleep the whole time that this was happening. So I wasn't going to mention it, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, what the hell? Where could they have even gone, you know? That night, after that event and everything was fine, I went back to bed, and the next morning I asked my mother and father if they had come into the room and played with my piggy bank. I was a little vague, and I know I'm 7 years old, so I wasn't like really telling a story or anything. I just said, hey, were you guys in the room last night playing with my piggy bank? And both of them were like, no. I was like, okay, well, it was probably a dream then, you know? I didn't really give much credence to myself. After I asked that question, they didn't ask any other follow-up questions, and I never offered anything else. And I also never told the story to my brother. So that was it. It was this isolated circumstance, and then we never talked about it, and I completely forgot about it for years. Now, there are some residual weird stuff that I think back as an adult that didn't really make a lot of sense. The first thing was, when my brother and I went to bed, the door was always shut behind us, and this was an old house, so everything creaked. Everything was rickety. So if the door had opened, we would have heard it. Not only that, my parents would have heard it. And not only that, we had a yellow lab that was very protective at the time. She did live in a kennel, but if she heard noise in the house, she would have been barking like crazy. She would have made sure everyone knew that there was someone in this house with us. So it's weird that this door never opened. It's weird that my dog never freaked out. It's weird that she never even sensed anything was off. And it's so weird that when I peered over and looked, I wasn't afraid. So I can't really put a lot of this together for myself. Now, as I considered that further as an adult, I would think to myself, okay, so maybe this was a ghost. Maybe this was the first and only experience I ever had with a ghost. How is something else that quiet? How is something else that undetectable, especially to an animal? How is it that I felt so calm in the situation, like the whole thing wasn't real? Maybe it was a ghost. And I don't believe in ghosts. Even to this day, I don't. So I just sat there and was like rationalizing it. If it wasn't a dream, there's no way it was real people. They would have made more noise. Maybe it was a paranormal event. So quite some time goes by. I'm about 22 years old, and I take my brother over to my dad's house. We're all hanging out for a little bit, and I start telling this story. I said, hey, Dad, Dev, I don't know why I just remembered this, but I have this story for you, and I want to know what you guys think about this. I'm halfway into telling this story, and I see my brother's eyes get wide, and his mouth drops, and he cuts me off. He goes, Barry, stop. What he told me next sent chills up my spine. He said that he was laying there in bed. He's 5 or 6 years old, which is exactly around the same time that this happened. He's laying in bed trying to go to sleep when all of a sudden he starts to hear this noise coming from the closet door. He said that it sounded like really faint whispering, and so he looked over towards the closet, and the closet slowly starts opening. Now he's sitting there watching this, and it's freaking him out a little bit. Now I didn't hear any of this from my position up in bed. I didn't hear any of this. But apparently, according to him, 2 figures walked out of the closet. Now again, our door was always closed. This room was really dark, so it was always very difficult to see anything that moved around at night. But he said distinctly he saw 2 figures walk past his bed, walk over to our desk, and start fiddling around with stuff. I asked him to describe the figures, and he said from what he remembers, one of them was taller, and then one of them was stubby and fat. This apparently terrified him, and as slow as he could, he grabbed his blankets and put them over his head and waited until he couldn't hear anything anymore. After a while, the noise stopped, and he pulled himself out from under the covers, and he looks around the room. The closet door is now shut, and no one is around. It's as if it never happened. And he was just sitting there thinking to himself through the night, is someone in the closet? And does Barry know? Like, what the hell? But the weird thing is, the next day, he never told Mom and Dad. He never told me. He kept this story to himself. I honestly don't know what to think about this. There are so many unanswered questions with this story, and I know no matter how many times I ask, I'm never going to get any straight answers from this. It passed so long ago, I'm never going to know what happened. Was it 2 people who were actually in our house? But if that's the case, why didn't the dog sense them? Why didn't our very protective yellow lab know that they were in there? If it was 2 adult human beings, real live people, then they must have known that they were in a kid's closet. All of our toys were in there. And David and I went into that closet all the time. There must have been a point during that same day where we had gone into that closet to put our toys away or take some toys out and play with them. We would have seen them. There was no hidden compartments. There was no attic space or anything. There was just a small closet. So how were they in there? If it was people, there are too many unanswered questions. If it was a ghost, why did it only ever happen one time and never again? I kept this story to myself for a very long time, and I'm really glad that I finally told my brother about it. Because now that I have some sort of validation, it does make this story a little more believable, even just for myself. I wouldn't have taken this story seriously, and if I could go back in time, I would go back to that day, and I would have confronted this situation. Because if it was people, oh dude, my dad would have got up and would have kicked their ass, easy. If it was a ghost, we could have had a pretty cool adventure going on that night. I do like to imagine going back in time and being in that situation fresh over again and me peering over the bed and confronting them. It turns out they're ghosts, but they're trying to lie to us and tell us, no, we're human beings. We're just people, you know? We came here to surprise you. Like these ghosts are sitting there trying to convince us that they're human beings. I mean, I wouldn't have bought it. It's very easy to tell when a ghost is lying. You can see right through them.